The windshield wipers on Elias Thorne's old truck were losing their battle against the Maine nor'easter. Every few seconds, a fresh sheet of freezing rain slammed against the glass, blurring the world into a chaotic mosaic of gray and black. Elias gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles ached, his chest tight with a pressure that had nothing to do with the storm. Hold on just a moment before we continue. If this story is touching something in you, please take a second to like this video and subscribe. It genuinely makes a difference and helps me bring you more stories like this one. I also want to hear from you. Write in the comments, where are you right now? Are you tucked away in a peaceful village where stars fill the sky, or surrounded by the hum and glow of a city that never sleeps? Behind him, 30 miles away, was a house that no longer felt like a home. He could still see Sarah's face, not the face he had married 10 years ago, but the one from an hour ago, sharp, exhausted, and framed by the harsh light of the kitchen. They had argued over a forgotten anniversary, but that was just the surface. Beneath it lay months of silence, missed dinners, and the slow, agonizing realization that they were drifting into separate oceans. He had walked out because the air in the room had become unbreathable. He needed space, but the Atlantic coast was offering him no room to move. As the road began to vanish beneath a slurry of ice and mud, Elias realized he wasn't going to make it to a hotel. His vision was tunneling, and his breath was coming in shallow, panicked bursts. He needed a harbor. 3 miles up a winding, pine-choked lane sat a small cedar-shingled cottage. It belonged to Martha, Sarah's mother. Martha was a woman who spoke in proverbs and smelled of wood smoke and peppermint. She was the only person who truly saw through Elias's stoic exterior. With a gut-wrenching turn of the wheel, he steered the truck toward the flickering amber light in her window. When he stumbled onto the porch, soaked to the bone and shaking, the door opened before he could even knock. Martha stood there in a thick wool cardigan, her silver hair pulled back in a practical knot. She didn't look surprised. She looked like she had been waiting. "Inside, Elias," she said, her voice a calm anchor in the howling wind. "Before the frost takes root in your bones." She didn't pelt him with questions. She draped a heavy Hudson Bay blanket over his shoulders and led him to the hearth, where a fire roared with a fierce, orange hunger. As he thawed, the story poured out of him, the resentment, the feeling of failure, and the terrifying thought that his marriage was a ghost ship. Martha listened with a stillness that was both comforting and heavy. "You're trying to build a bridge by throwing stones at the other side, Elias," she said softly, poking at a glowing log. "You can't reach her if you're too busy guarding your own shore." The exhaustion finally hit him, a physical weight that made his eyelids heavy. Martha stood up to check the guest wing, but she returned moments later with a grimace. "The storm has been unkind, Elias." A branch came through the skylight in the guest room. "The bed is soaked, and the floor is a pond. The couch in the den is no better, the roof is weeping there too." Elias looked at the floor, ready to sleep on the rug by the fire, but Martha wouldn't hear of it. "The master bedroom is the only dry place left. It's a king-sized bed, and I'm an old woman who sleeps like a statue. You're like a son to me, and I won't have you catching pneumonia on my watch. We'll share the space. It's a storm, Elias. We do what we must to survive." The arrangement was born of necessity, but it felt surreal. Upstairs, the room was a sanctuary of lavender and old books. Martha placed a row of heavy, decorative pillows down the center of the mattress, a boundary of silk and down. As they lay in the dark, the wind screaming against the eaves, the silence invited a deeper honesty. Elias stared at the ceiling, the shadows of the fire dancing like spirits. "I'm afraid, Martha," he whispered. "I'm afraid that even if I go back, the person she loved isn't there anymore." Martha's voice came from the other side of the pillow wall, steady and wise. "Love isn't a museum piece, Elias. It's not something you put in a glass case and expect to stay the same. It's a living thing. It scars, it heals, and it changes shape. You and Sarah are just in the middle of a shedding. It hurts to lose the old skin, but it's the only way to grow." She told him about her own husband, a man who had been as stubborn as a mule and as deep as the sea. She spoke of the nights they spent in silence, and the mornings they chose to start over. Her words were like a map through the fog, helping Elias see that his conflict wasn't a sign of the end, but a cry for a new beginning. Hours later, the sound of a vehicle struggling up the drive broke the trance of the night. Elias sat bolt upright, his heart hammering. A pair of headlights cut through the swirling snow, illuminating the frost on the window. It was Sarah. She had followed him. She had braved the black ice and the blinding whiteout because the thought of him out in the world alone was more terrifying than the anger between them. Elias met her at the door. Sarah was a mess, her hair tangled, her eyes swollen from crying, her hands trembling as she clutched her coat. For a long minute, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock and the dying hiss of the fire. "I thought I lost you," Sarah whispered, her voice breaking. "I was just hiding," Elias replied, stepping forward to take her frozen hands in his. "But I think I was hiding long before the storm started." Martha appeared in the shadows of the hallway, a quiet sentinel. She didn't say a word. She simply took Sarah's wet coat and pointed toward the kitchen, where a kettle was already beginning to whistle. She gave them the space they needed, the sacred ground where two people either fall apart or fuse back together. By the glow of a single candle, Elias and Sarah spoke. They didn't shout. They didn't accuse. They spoke in the low, hushed tones of survivors. Sarah admitted her fear of being invisible, and Elias confessed his dread of being inadequate. They realized that their argument wasn't about an anniversary. It was about the terror that they were no longer each other's priority. As the clock struck 4, a strange peace settled over the cottage. The storm outside began to lose its teeth, the wind fading to a rhythmic moan. When the sun finally began to bleed over the Atlantic horizon, it revealed a world transformed. The trees were encased in crystal, and the snow was a pristine, unbroken sheet of white. Elias and Sarah stood on the porch, wrapped in a single blanket, watching the light catch the ice. Martha joined them, handing each a mug of steaming coffee. She looked out at the frozen landscape and smiled. "The world looks different after a nor'easter, doesn't it? It's cold, yes, but it's clean. The weight has been washed away." Elias looked at Sarah, and for the first time in a year, he saw the woman he had promised to protect. The distance hadn't vanished, but the bridge was being built, stone by heavy stone. As they walked down the steps toward the truck, the sun warming the back of their necks, Elias looked back at the small cottage. He realized that Martha hadn't just given him a bed for the night. She had given him a lens. The drive home would be long, and the roads would still be treacherous. There were still difficult conversations ahead and habits that needed breaking. But as Elias put the truck in gear and felt Sarah's head rest on his shoulder, he knew the direction they were heading. The storm had done its work. It had stripped away the distractions and left them with the only thing that mattered, the choice to stay. And as the cottage faded into the rearview mirror, the light of the morning sun turned the icy road into a path of gold. They were going home, not to the house they had left, but to the one they were finally ready to build together.